Hello, welcome back to Recipe to Revenue. I'm your host, Leah Messina. Today, I'm joined by someone whose career sits right at the crossroads of innovation, strategy, and the future of food. Auroni Majumdar is the VP of Global Open Innovation at CJ Jiading Foods and brings more than 20 years of experience across some of the most influential organizations in our industry, from PepsiCo to IFF to his current leadership role at CJ Foods. Auroni is a business-minded technical leader who's worked across the entire value chain: B2C, B2B ingredients, manufacturing, commercialization, strategy, and M&A. His work has shaped everything from consumer-loved beverages to high-value ingredient systems and large-scale innovation pipelines. Today, he leads the integration of external technologies and strategic partnerships that drive growth and differentiation for CJ's global portfolio. In this conversation, we're diving into the topics founders and operators rarely get candid insight into: how to think about M&A, what makes a great strategic partnership, and how to protect your moat when working with co-mans, and what big companies really look for when evaluating emerging brands and technologies. Auroni brings a clear, pragmatic, and deeply experienced perspective. I know you're going to walk away with a sharper understanding of how value is truly created in our industry. Let's see what Auroni has to say. Hi, Auroni. So happy to have you here on Recipe to Revenue today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Good, doing great. I am so excited to have you talk with us today about, you have a really unique intersection of experience between strategy, innovation, R&D, M&A. You're just a wealth of knowledge in this space. So thank you for joining us and sharing your experience with us.
No,
Yeah.
happy to be here. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah. So as the VP of R&D of Global Open Innovation, which is an amazing title for CJ Foods, tell us a little bit about what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, sure. So my team's in charge of external technology scouting, assessments, validation, and integration into our pipeline. And that could be from an R&D pipeline. It could also be supporting import initiatives, taking products from one part of the world into Korea or other parts of our global business, in addition to technologies. Um, when I refer to technologies, I classify my portfolio across innovation domains, and there's 6 of them. So technologies can fall into new ingredient technologies, new process technologies, package technologies, ag and aquaculture, fermentation, and then digital solutions, software-based tools, AI-based tools,
Yeah.
to make our workflows more efficient.
Yeah.
And the team, it's a global team. So we have hubs around the world. There's a hub and spoke model that I've implemented where each of the hubs, their primary task is to scout for technologies in their origin region, the surrounding areas, and then to cross-fertilize it through our headquarters in Korea to the global businesses and the regions. And then the hubs also have a secondary role. If there's critical mass in terms of business and R&D workforce in that region with their own regional needs, they're also tasked with identifying, prioritizing, and managing projects directly for that region. But it's designed in such a way where I mentioned the products from one part of the world, but also the technologies from one part of the world to another part of the world.
Yeah. So you're really looking at the entire ecosystem of innovation with all these different components. So what are some ways that your team is scouting for technology?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I've had smaller scouting functions in past roles, like 1 or 2 resources. So we kind of like dipped our toe. I've dipped my toe into it in a variety of different capacities. And I learned a lot along the way just through exposure and collaboration with other leaders that are in the function, and just being engaged in the ecosystem, both startups and mature suppliers, so on and so forth. So from a scouting perspective, like the brute force, boots on the ground, Googling, LinkedIn,
Yeah.
software tools, to just scout, the pitch books and the CB insights and so on and so forth,
Yeah.
like scout against targeted needs, cold call chains. We do that, but I would say not a whole lot of it. I'm a big network relationships individual. I like to find mutually beneficial collaborations, and that's from scouting into development, into implementation, commercialization, so on and so forth, right? So there's
Yeah.
lots of different partnership models that I seek to implement within the company. But one thing is our team's limited in bandwidth, just by way of FTEs. It's not small. We
Yeah.
have 11 resources on a global basis,
Yeah.
and but that still limits our reach. So what I encourage each of my regional hub leaders to do is actually build out their network in their region and
Yeah.
try to find entities that are looking for the same things that we're looking for, or investing in them, incubating them, accelerating them. Or there's a regional program that has some sort of regional imperative to foster these companies, and to build relationships with them, inform them on what we're looking for. So there's
Yeah.
more organic matchmaking. That to me works a lot better, because you get insights, you share insights, right? There's mutual benefit from our side back to those entities as well. One, there's a corporate entity that's trying to lift these companies into the next stage of their business plan. But there's also sharing insights, right? So if there's pending decisions on the strategic direction of their core technology platform, what products they should focus on, how they should think about performance, or investment decisions. Like, we're there for it. We like to share what we can within the bounds of confidentiality. But we use that model, the brute force model. And then if it's like a really urgent priority, all hands on deck, we can enlist in external scouting services. So landscape, do formal landscapes with technology scouting providers and so on and so forth.
Yeah. How long is that process for you guys if you do have something, let's say, that falls in the more emergent situation?
I'm like a very near term innovation guy. Like, for me, like, I've done a lot of long-term work, mid-term work, and just so much changes by the time long-term becomes short-term. One, the need might just evaporate or in of itself. The technology evolves, the amount of investment in the space, the platforms, the picks and shovels to support the development of the technology evolve. There's more players. Certain players you thought were the players phased out. New ones came
constantly evolving.
Yeah. So for me, it's like, let me just wait until it becomes in that, like, 6 month, 1.5 year horizon. So for me, that's where I focus. We try to have a balanced portfolio. The normal kind of 75-25 type, near term, short-term business impact, and then the higher risk, higher reward kind of moonshot space, right? And all the shades in between. But urgent for us is like, there's a regulatory need or there's a competitive threat, and like, we need to act now. We need to adjust or launch a new innovation, and we have a year to do it. I would say my current organization operates very different than some of my past organizations from a speed to market standpoint. We're a lot quicker, and there's a lot of reasons for that in terms of like the supporting ecosystem from scale up distribution and the actual consumers of some of our core markets. The US, which is the geography a lot of my experience was anchored on, moves very differently. It's a smaller quantity, higher quality in terms of like volume dimension, nationwide distributions at this global MNC level. Whereas, a lot of other companies that are not US origin and tackling other geographies that are smaller populations, they can be much more nimble. The systems allow it too. the Walmarts, the Targets, they have certain cycles, and you
Right.
have to fit within those cycles. Where
Yeah.
other groups and other, channels offer a little bit more flexibility, so we can move faster. So urgent,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Within the context of that.
exactly.
Yeah. So, I'm glad you brought that up. The speed to market conversation has been such a hot topic lately. And we've talked about it a few times on the podcast from different perspectives. So for those that are coming from bigger global brands, you have experience, with big brands like PepsiCo and of course CJ Foods. So for those that are looking at that speed to market conversation and trying to get to market faster as a large company, what is some of your advice or thoughts on that?
So I'm thinking about that question in two ways, right? So when I hear speed to market, I think about like first to innovate, and I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
not to as I try to give you this response
Yeah. Yeah.
because they're not directly related. Because I would say if you're
Mm-hmm.
a large company, um, it's not actually, you know what, I'm thinking about this in a few different ways now, right? So if you're a large company with mature product categories,
Mm-hmm.
first to innovate is probably not my suggestion.
Yeah.
And I would say that is because first to innovate carries a lot of risk, and there's an opportunity cost, which is really around incremental innovation against your core product platforms and
Mm-hmm.
brand assets, which is a lot less risk
Yeah.
and could still have the organizational materiality you need from a revenue standpoint. And it'll surely have the margin impact you strive for, right? Either that
Yeah.
neutrality or accretive margin. If you're first to innovate, chances are you're taking a margin hit because you don't have the
Mm-hmm.
scale, right? So there's a dilution element of it, and then there's also a risk to, the assessment of that revenue impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're prophesizing that the consumer demand is there, but it may or may not be. There's a lot of signals and consumer
Mm-hmm.
insights and things you can monitor and test markets and so on and so forth to increase your feasibility
Sure.
of what will happen, but you really don't know. So when it comes to first to innovate for large companies in mature categories, I think the recommendation is focus on who's doing it, who's taking that risk, and then either consider M&A and acquiring them, and then
Yeah.
bringing them to that next level of the S curve after they hit some key KPIs,
Mm-hmm.
business KPIs, and either make that decision or make the decision that you're going to, I hate to say it this way, but you're going to come up with a copycat and you're going to do it in a
Mm-hmm.
way that's more innovative. It's going to have more brand power behind it. It's going to have more marketing activation, and that's going to be your way towards market share. If you're in an emerging category and you are now launching products in an emerging product category that consumers want, but there's not a whole lot of benchmarks, and your business is in a growth stage, so you're deploying capital for greenfield projects and new manufacturing infrastructures, and it's less around RONA optimization and cut the tail of existing capability, and
Mm-hmm.
then add a flavor, add a couple of
Yeah.
ingredients, but stay within the existing infrastructure.
Sure.
Then you got to take gambles, right? You need insights to drive some of those gambles, but in those situations, speed to market, establish yourself and your brand as a key player in that broader product category in that specific product format is really important, right? Because it's open territory, right? It's free game. So because no one's established themselves yet. So
Yeah.
yeah, it really comes down to the company, its business strategy, right? Like what product categories are focused on, what type of brand assets do they have? Do they have brand assets? It's more around product capability, but like really trying to understand where your moats are, how you want to emphasize them, and then what that
Yeah.
short, mid, and long term strategy is going to be.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, that's all great advice. On the M&A side, what do you look for if you're going to go that route?
It's it's a great question, and it's like super complex. Oh yeah, let's start with like CPG, right? So I'm acquiring a CPG company. Um, a few different theses. One could be there's an emerging brand, there's a great business, it's really healthy. and it's really material. It's got great organizational culture that fits mine.
Hmm.
And even that last part, you may or may not need it, like depending on how you want to integrate the company. But let's say the
Sure.
first part of that is true. My thesis is simply I can buy it and I can distribute it in ways that it can't distribute itself because I have
Yeah.
either capabilities to move product and I have customers that they don't have access to.
Yeah.
And I can reduce the cost basis of those products because I have more economies of scale. So
Right.
look at my bill of materials, look at my COGS, figure out what I buy as part of my broader system, and then start to chip away and then grow the margin, reduce the cost. Super simple. Like I love that strategy.
Yeah.
Um, Another one could be like, hey, this company is trending, the brand's good, but the financials aren't so great. Like this isn't the EBITDA margin that we strive for as a company.
Yeah.
Um, and but there's things that I'm seeing that they're not doing that I can do in order to grow that and
Yeah.
improve the business or even activate, spend a higher percentage of revenue on marketing in order to activate the brand because I don't think their
Hmm.
strategy is right.
Hmm.
So in that situation, there's a lot of value add opportunity. And I
Yeah.
particularly like those. Like if I think I like to do an analogy, particularly with these two scenarios, to house purchasing, right? Like in
Hmm.
one situation, like I'm buying like a completely renovated house, it's ready to
Yeah.
go. Like I'm just gonna keep it for a while, ride it out. It's gonna appreciate. It's in a good neighborhood, so it's appreciate faster than the market. Then I'm gonna
Yeah.
sell it. The other one's like, hey, I found a gem. There's things wrong with it, but I like what's wrong with it because I can fix it. And I'm gonna
Yeah.
renovate it, and with those renovations, I'm gonna get a premium. So
Yeah.
like two very different M&A strategies in that sense. Um, like other shades of gray, really stemming from that last one is maybe I have products that I want to produce in an area and I'm contemplating building infrastructure. But the other option is could I acquire infrastructure? So if there's a
Hmm.
company that has open capacity, or the
Yeah.
business is actually struggling, but the capabilities exist, can I fire sell my way into manufacturing
Right.
assets that I was already looking to purchase,
Yeah.
plus some other interesting things that might come along with that acquisition? That could be a better financial decision, and it could actually have other synergies by way of capabilities, R&D, workforce related, what have you.
Yeah.
Um, Other things are, brand synergies. If I have products, but
Hmm.
my brand may or may not be as strong in a certain area, like could I consider, a brand, within that specific region
Hmm.
that's prominent to carry my products forward, or vice versa, good products, my brand. So there's a lot of different things. I think the devil's really in the details in the due
Yeah.
diligence process. I've done a lot of large, multi-billion dollar M&As. And it's interesting because the higher level theses, like to the extent that I mentioned, all sounded fantastic. And it
Hmm.
wasn't until you went under the hood and then you got into
Yeah.
some really detailed nuances and looked at, customer books or cultural and
Yeah.
organizational elements and sales side, sales culture and strategies that like things started to be like, oh, this isn't as cut and dry from an integration standpoint. That initial
Yeah.
like top five consulting level opinion is sound, but now like for the people that have to actually put this in place in the right way, like that's where things start to get a little bit more complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, going back to your house analogy, it really is like having that home inspection. And until you're in there and looking behind the walls and seeing if there's termites or not, you don't know, if on the surface it could be a beautiful home. Uh,
That's a great. I like that. I never thought of the home inspections, the due diligence analog. Right.
yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, so what are you seeing? You're looking at a global level in your role. What are you seeing in terms of trends right now in the marketplace across these different areas that you're mentioning? Anything that's really jumping out to you as we're looking into the new year?
I mean, there's a lot of. I think the last 2 years, have been really interesting because if I compare the last few years to like the earlier part of my career,
Yeah.
the pace and acceleration and evolution of trends is just infinitely faster,
Yeah.
right? Like
So
the
true.
first 10 or 12 years of my career, like you'd have these trends and they were like strong signals, but it was soft action or slow action. So it's like, oh, like they want, more of this and there's more of that. And this is, rotating out and this is rotating in. But it was so slow, right? Like you could
Yeah.
actually like take your time and be really thoughtful and like, you know what you want, and you still can. But now it's between like social media and the influencer movement and
Hmm.
heightened focus and change and the overall conversation from a regulatory environment. Like there's just and in food, like related to food, right? There's just a lot of like a large spotlight, and there's a lot of
Hmm.
emerging tech too that's like
Yeah.
colliding with this space of hey, we can now do this. Like, can we do this? Like, how should we do this?
Right.
So like there's a lot of cycles and is actually a friend made this analogy a few weeks ago and it was like spot on for me. It's like food is like fashion. And I was like,
Yeah.
it's fast fashion now.
Fast fashion. Oh, how funny. I've never thought about it like that, but we definitely have entered that phase of the world, haven't we?
Yeah, like totally. And it's, so my riff on it is I think about it's what I call the high school effect, right? So
Hmm.
like I grew up 83 born. I grew up, late 80s, 90s,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Like the high school effect was, think about an adoption curve. You've got 25% of the cool kids that are bringing something in,
Hmm.
and then it crosses a chasm. Like you got 50% of your population starting to buy it. By the time it hits that last 25%, it's like everyone's got,
Yeah.
the Airwalks and the Jinko jeans, and now
Right.
it's
Right.
like you can't wear them anymore.
Yeah.
So to me, that was like a solid, year, 2 years, I would say.
Yeah.
Maybe a year. I don't know. But now that cycle is just compacted.
Yeah.
And the same for food, where it's like these brands that existed forever, signal of safety, food safety, right? Like that was one
Hmm.
of the big things, like the Pepsi brands and the Coke brands and all. It's like that's just gonna
Yeah.
not make me sick, and it's gonna be good quality, like from a sensory
Yeah.
perspective. And
Sure.
growing up, it's like Pepsi, Coke, and like you didn't want to get RC Cola, like but
Yeah.
now it's so democratized and there's so many options and you don't think about that. You think about like everything in that store has to be good, otherwise it wouldn't be that store. And the
Hmm.
stores know that. Like they operate each of their aisles as their own little P&Ls. So
Sure.
they're trying to have the best products and on the shelf that are, moving at the highest margin possible. Um, and you just have so much optionality and a combination of I don't know, ADHD plus having optionality, people now
Yeah.
just want optionality,
Yeah.
which is so interesting because it makes innovation super exciting, but also super hard because like the stickiness of a brand and a product is so much less
Yeah.
in an aggregate situation, right? Like
Right.
obviously you'll have certain gems that are like become the staples in your cupboard,
Hmm.
but I think things go in and out so much quicker. And
Yeah.
and we were just talking about M&A, right? Like
Hmm.
older, like if when I think about like the vitamin waters and the body armors, it's like these seem so great, and then it was like, wait, but like what happened to the demand that looked so great right after
Yeah.
we bought it? It's like they moved on. Someone else came with something new with the right,
Hmm.
celebrity endorsement, and now they moved on. So does that strategy go away? No, I think the valuations need to
Hmm.
become a little bit more humble, realizing that
Hmm.
those break even and those those financial models are a little bit different.
I mean, you're bringing up so many great points, and and I was thinking, on one hand, and I don't know if I've heard this or just kind of, accumulated this thought over various conversations, but the younger the generation gets, the less brand loyalty they have. And, I see that, consumer behavior now is they just want to go and back to your point about ADHD, like they just want to like try it. Let me try this flavor drink today. Let me try this brand today. And because there's so many choices, it's harder to create that brand loyalty when you have so many options. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's absolutely right. I think the days of like long-term brand loyalty are gone. And it's not black and white, right? You will have
Yeah.
brands that'll survive. You always will. There's no question, but not in the same way that they were, where it's like these are the brands that you buy from, and they're going to innovate, and then you're going to try their innovation, but it's going to be the
Yeah.
same set of brands. There's more entrepreneurial activity,
Yeah.
which supports this movement, of course. That mid-market segment is eating the lunch of the large tier players because
Yeah.
they're more flexible, they're more nimble, their business is smaller, which means materiality for that business is less.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do things and be like, hey, that's, 10 million to my base revenue is awesome. 10 million to a large, billion-dollar company is not even worth the conversation. So
Yeah.
you're doing these things like quick, and then all of a sudden that 10 million is like, oh, I have a $200 million business, and now it's starting to create noise.
Yeah.
Um, so and consumers now like they're like, yeah, like that's what's happening, and all of a sudden like someone's promoting something new. Like also these mid market companies, their marketing strategies are way different. Like obviously it's not like print, but it's not even
Yeah.
nationwide television anymore. Everything's
Right.
streaming, so
Yeah.
it's much more like TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
viral campaign, make this really popular. And then the consumer is like, oh, like that's it. That's what I'm going to drink from
Yeah.
now on. That's what I'm going to eat from now on. And
Yeah.
now on being like the next like 6 months until someone else comes in with something new.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, I can't scroll in Instagram without, seeing a piece of content that you're not sure. It's like, is this an influencer piece of content or a sponsored post, or is it the brand hiring an influencer? It's just like so much it's gotten so blurred about who is the originator of the piece of content, clearly showing the brand now. So
Yeah,
interesting
I
changes.
struggle with like I say TikTok, but I'm actually like Instagram was the leap that I
Yeah.
made,
Hmm.
generationally.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
we're about the same age, so yeah, yeah. I'm relating to your Airwalks and Jenkos and all that. Yeah,
uh, But I can't trust anything on Instagram. Like
yeah,
it's crazy. They'll be like, oh, there's this new vaccine that does this, this, and this, like cancer is cured. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like there's just like,
yeah,
and maybe it is. I have no idea.
yeah.
And we just don't know about it here. But there's so much like
Hmm.
noise. You don't know what's
Yeah,
paid for. You don't know what's just like rage bait and whatnot. So it's like complicated. Um,
seriously.
yeah, or just a straight scam to take your money. But it's
Yeah,
there, it works, and it a lot of trends, right? You create a challenge around a product. Like if I were to start like challenge it up, right? Like whatever it
yeah.
might be, get someone like challenge someone to try my product. It's brilliant,
Hmm.
actually,
Yeah,
marketing. And then now all of a sudden there's like you're saying I can't do it, like, and then yeah, people will do it.
yeah. Yeah, I think, in the innovation side of the creativity of marketing has gotten really interesting. And I think, but it's almost, we have to, right? We have to continue pushing the boundary to get attention, to cut through the noise of what's out there. And there are so many, we'll call them trends just for the sake of conversation, but everything from functional beverages to non-alcoholic drinks to like there's always like a theme of food and beverage to talk about in these conversations too, and you kind of have to figure out where you want to fit in with a category to market. So
Yeah, I forgot. That was actually your initial question for what I'm seeing in
yeah,
2026 or what I'm predicting. It actually like a broader answer to it is there's a lot of more information, a lot of which is, valid, a lot of it's questionable, but there's a lot more information. There's like there's a lot of apps that are becoming popular. Like the Yuka app, I think is really
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, I love that one.
People are looking at it. It's talking about additives. So it's just bringing a spotlight to like nuanced components and attributes of certain products, which
Yeah,
become innovation opportunities. Because if you find the
mhm,
attribute that people are centered on and you do it differently to
yeah,
address the unmet need, you can now use that as a way to penetrate the market. So yeah, like things like health and wellness, we've been talking about forever,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say the earlier part of my career was all around reduction strategies, like less
Yep.
sugar, less
Less
salt,
sugar.
less
Yeah.
fat.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah, now it's more about enrichment. So more protein, let's
Mm-hmm.
more fiber, the functional space that you brought up.
Mm-hmm.
What else can it do? Energy, focus, immunity, a lot of that sleep, a lot of that came post COVID as well.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on that those specific attributes of health and wellness.
Yep.
Um, Attention to bioactives, dietary supplements, I think is having a little bit of a day.
Mm-hmm.
Where it was always a big industry, but now it's like, hey, some of this stuff is actually having like noticeable impact for a larger part of the population,
Yeah.
and incorporating that away from like capsules and pills, which inherently there's a fatigue associated with, like I can't just take 6 or 7 of these.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Nobody wants to sit there. That's that really when you think of the experience like of consumption, sitting there with a bunch of pills is it can't be anybody's like joyful part of their day.
yeah, exactly. So I think like functional foods, functional beverages, um, uh, clean label, health and wellness.
Yeah.
GLP-1 is like going to be like it already is, and it's going to
Yeah.
continue to be impactful. Um, it, to me, it's just like we talked about, like S curves and adoption,
Yeah.
right? Like it's still in that early phase of the adoption cycle, and I wouldn't even
Mm-hmm.
say it's crossed the chasm. Like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the bigger part of your normal distribution still doesn't even understand it, let alone how to get it. It's not
Yeah.
easy, completely easy to get. Um, Once that happens, like for me, like food industry is already, it's like an existential crisis in a way, like
Yeah.
a black swan event, in the sense that if you aggregate all consumption, there's a volume, right? A global volume, and then there's geographical volumes, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's daily volumes, and like share of stomach, and all of that just got smaller on a
Yeah.
global basis, right? Not each
Yeah.
individual, and it only stands to become more, right? So if the system is designed to produce a certain amount of food, you're not going to need that much. So now you have quote unquote idle asset or capacity.
Mm.
And how do you grow businesses if you're not moving product? There's ways for sure, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
pricing opportunities, there's the enrichment, and then pricing
Yeah.
opportunities associated with that, portioning, and so on and so forth. But that is like massive, right?
Yeah.
To me, it's like I can't like. Part of me is like, oh well, like what's going to happen to the industry that I've anchored my career on, and then two, it's like this is so exciting.
Oh
Like I
yeah.
love thinking about it. It does present a significant opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. If you like creative problem solving, this is a great place to be. So, and there's just like you said, there's so much change, and you're leading the way on a lot of that. So you're in a good spot. Uh, I want to just touch upon partnerships because that's something that we had talked about, in previous conversations, and you know, people can't go at it alone and be and reach the level of success that they hope to achieve without partnering with others in the industry. So talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on that and how that fits into growth strategies.
Um, yeah, I'm a huge proponent of partnerships. One, just by way of like day to day,
Yeah.
my core role, and just the just on the basis of like you don't need to have all the capabilities yourself, right? And invest in it.
Yeah.
It's a better way to optimize your overall return if you're able to couple and marry them with other
Yeah.
companies that are in similar but adjacent spaces that are looking to do something to support you or alongside you. And there's so many ways to develop partnerships, right? So I think if I can anchor a few of those statements with some examples, right? Scaling partnerships, scaling and distribution. Um, Actually, I mean, even going back, right? Let's think about it from like an standard innovation
Yeah.
process, right? So you have marketing and there's capability around understanding a consumer. developing concepts around it. Um, you're probably not partnering so much there unless it's like fee for service type stuff, right?
Yeah.
Now you're developing a concept and you need a brand to carry that forward. I would say that's like a first meaningful point where, okay,
Yeah.
I want to launch this product in this region with this demographic. I don't have the brand in my asset portfolio to carry it forward the way I want to. Who does? And then they're like, hey, you're not here. Like, I don't know if your intentions are to be here. If it is, then maybe this isn't a great conversation. But if it's not, and I'm a spillover geography or this is a spillover strategy, like let's partner. Can I license your brand? Um, it for them, it's like, you know what? I have no intentions of going there. Like, do your thing, but I want some review rights, right, and decision rights because it is my brand. And even though it's over there, there's a systemic effect that could happen if something goes wrong. So product quality and sensory and so on and so forth. Um, there's R&D capabilities, right? So R&D capabilities are like around, can be around, I want to create this specific product and, um, and someone else wants to launch a concept, let's say, and they don't have the capabilities to create that product. Like partner with someone that does. Usually the R&D capabilities come with something else. Otherwise, you're like more in the fee for service kind of formulation lab space. In that, again, it's fee for service, but it usually comes with some level of scale up. So you have assets either directly owned or through co-manufacturing networks to produce something, and along the lines of Salesforce to sell it through channels and then distribution mechanisms to distribute it. So anywhere along the way, it's like, how do I bring these things together? So something interesting, like, I was at PepsiCo and we had a Starbucks joint venture, widely public. And that was a perfect capability share. It's like, we have this brand, we have this desire to go ready to drink. You have this innate capability. There's distribution mechanisms. Like, let's get together. Let's figure out how to co-invest into this space and then share revenue. So that's a lot in the CPG kind of collaborative space. If I take a pause and pivot to technology, you have like a lot of entrepreneurs that are developing, new ingredients, let's say, and there's certain capabilities that they have. Usually, it starts like if it's in this disruptive space, it starts more technical, and it's at the ingredient level. Like they need help understanding how that ingredient performs in a matrix in an application, right? If there's a company that's interested in the ingredient, providing those in-kind resources to evaluate it, give feedback, iterate, with this inevitable idea that if this company finds the performance of the ingredient that they're looking for, they will purchase it from me. So what a perfect, mutually beneficial relationship there.
Right.
And there's ways that can evolve into much, much bigger, right? Joint development, like the simplest is like, hey, you have something transactional, bring it in, let me look at it, let me give you feedback, tell you how to make it better. When it's ready, I'll buy it from you. And for me, one thing I'll mention when it comes to strategic partnerships is the ambition shouldn't be having a strategic partnership. It should be accomplishing the objective in the simplest way possible. And if it requires a strategic partnership, then go down that.
Then go do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would prefer, like, if that works and you got your capital locked in and you have a way to scale and regulatory approve and ship and like do your thing. I just want to be there in line to purchase. I'd love to keep it that way. But oftentimes that's not the case, particularly the more disruptive you are and the state of the company. So then it could be like, okay, well, you need help scaling, right? I may or may not have those capabilities, but I have companies that I purchase from that do, right? And this presents like a golden nugget business opportunity.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Right? Where it's like, I'm the offtake. I need you to make something for me to buy. Are you in? Right? Like it's such a, straightforward conversation. And then the entrepreneur, like there's a conversation there in terms of like financial nuances of, what's the relationship between me and that intermediary. And then for the intermediary, they need to assess this whole equation, even though there's like a purchase agreement right here of how
Hmm.
that business tallies against all the other businesses they have,
Right.
from a materiality and margin perspective, as an example. Like, you don't want to just take on, it's crazy to say, but you don't just want to take on a profitable business. You need it to have a certain financial
Yeah.
profile that
Yeah.
makes sense for your enterprise. So there's lots of nuances to what I'm saying. Um, but I think the net is, like, there's no reason to have everything. If you have everything because you're big and, at the point of time of your origin, like, you needed it because there's less democratization of these capabilities, then,
Yep.
like, great. That's rarely the case. Or
Sure.
if it is the case, it's more that it was the case. And a lot of
Hmm.
those capabilities have evolved. So now you need new capabilities. So it's either take, your dry powder and invest to build it in house, or find out who has it, and then just, like, kind of have a mature conversation. Be like, hey, you're trying to do this, I'm trying to do this. There has to be something
Yeah.
that is financially incentivizes, but also helps deliver our business strategy collectively together.
Right.
Um, to do this in a way that, we can do it together.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it goes back to what you said earlier about your network, right? There's a lot of, like you said, a lot of other nuances in there if the financially it works out, but tapping into that network so you both can rise up and continue to grow. Um, and to the part about if they may not be the best fit, but maybe they have somebody in their network that is.
Yeah, I think the network's super helpful. I think the people element. It's not just the network. It's like the
Yeah.
people element is
Mm-hmm.
it's so, actually, another, like, this year, another comment that really stuck to me is, like, when you're in this space of, like, open innovation, investing, like VC investment, like, part of your role is to actually be HR. And you're actually, like, sitting there and you're like, guys, like, let's just think about, like, the people part of it. And there's no, like, I can spit out, like, several partnership archetypes at, like,
Yeah.
a certain level, but then
Right.
each specific situation has, like, a really bespoke model that you would implement.
Mm-hmm.
And it really comes down to not just, like, what you can do from that capability
Yeah.
synergy and business synergy standpoint, but it's like what the people there want to do together, and, like, the trust element of it. Like, that's the other, actually, like, well, I'm glad that popped in my head. The trust
Yeah.
piece is so huge because I never want to win a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, winning a deal is short term, because by
Yeah.
the time the deal's over, like, that guy's gone, that entity's gone, because they found out that you actually won,
Yeah.
right? Like, you want it to be like, so I have this analogy in my head. I love that this popped in,
Yeah.
where it's like, if you're a kid and you have to, like, choose between, like, two things and two
Mm-hmm.
piles, right? Like, the best thing to do is, like, one person creates both piles and lets the other person choose,
Mm-hmm.
right? Versus, like, I have the bigger pile and I choose. Like, that doesn't make sense, right? So
Right. Yeah.
um, so you create a situation where it's like, hey, look, I think both of these things could work. I'm fine with both, but you choose. So you let the other person really drive it and assess it for themselves. And you want that
Yeah, because
trust.
so much more buy-in then. Yeah,
Yeah.
they feel part of the decision. And I like your the nuance there of they're not being sold to and they don't feel like they lost, starting off the relationship like they lost out on something. It really your analogy with the two
Oh,
piles, like
it's
it's a
horrible.
win-win.
It's horrible. And, like, I say that because, like, earlier in my career, it was more subconscious, or it was more, just, like, the power of the relationship, right? Like, being part of the
Mhm.
MNC part of it. Like, there was this general philosophy, like, we're a multi-billion-dollar organization. Like,
Yeah.
we want this, and if they don't want to give us that, we move on. And it was like, but God, like, that doesn't. It may have worked then,
Yeah.
right? Because
Mhm.
you did have a lot of weight you could throw around, and maybe you still do, but there's a lot of headwinds for the large tier. I mentioned the mid market. Like, I think now
Mhm.
it's like, no, no, no. Like, you want this relationship to start off right. You want, actually,
Yeah.
3 years from now, to be like, oh wow, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Like, what a great process. And, like, now what's about to expire, like, we're doing this for another 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, like that's what, like, for me, that's what I strive for, because otherwise you create a lot of resentment, and there's
Yeah.
a lot of forward challenges that might occur.
Right.
And oftentimes, like, if it's bad enough, or if you win like strong enough, like, they're gonna go to a competitor, and it might really, like, and like, that's not the
Mm-hmm.
motivation to keep it
Mm-hmm.
neutral, but those are some of
Sure.
the outcomes of if you don't,
Yep.
right?
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense too. Yeah, that's a great analogy there too as well. So before we wrap up, you've given us such an amazing insight into, what a role as the, global head of innovation does the day to day, but so much about, how uh, the technology part of all of this works, and, what you're looking for in your role. So thank you for shedding a light on that. With your experience that you have had in this industry and the depth of your experience, what do you feel has been your recipe to revenue?
Um, the rest, for me personally, I think what really excited me about my current role is actually the series of experiences and roles that I've had prior to, right? So when I took this role, like, there's ways to kind of be um, a little skewed to, like, uh, to certain core functions. Like, so for example, like, you can be very R&D centric in global innovation, and you're just purely
Mm-hmm.
around like technical performance. Like, wow, like, look at what I can do now. But you may be lacking like consumer and market fit level assessment, or unit economic, or overall economic and materiality for your enterprise, scalability,
Yeah.
supply chain health, regulatory, so on. So I had like a series of these experiences that were kind of like very individualized across those assessment criteria that I just kind of mounted
Mm-hmm.
off.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm able to kind of take all those experiences and say, like, hey, okay, I'm part of this big enterprise, and we have ambitions at this enterprise level, and I'm in this function that's an important part of driving that. But I
Right.
need to make sure that what we work on is the right portfolio. And how do I do that? How do I assess that? I assess it the way that I learned how to assess it through these
Mm-hmm.
individual experiences. So I think that's
Sure.
like my recipe to why I feel that I like what I do, and why I feel that I'm good at what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Perfect. Auroni, thank you so much for joining me today on Recipe to Revenue, and for spending your time sharing all your expertise with us. Um, for those that want to connect with you, we'll add your LinkedIn link in the conversation down below. And we look forward to seeing you again in the new year, and seeing how you continue to innovate on the global level.
Yeah, great. Sounds good. Thank you for having me. This was great. Had a lot of fun.
Anytime. Me too. Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Take care.